Follow now the word, hear now the word of the Lord from the first book of Kings, chapter 18, beginning in verse 1. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Or Carmel if you're from Georgia. Elijah went before the people and said, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him." But the people said no. Then Elijah said to them, "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let them choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, the God who answers by fire. He is God." Then all the people said, "What you say is good." And Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose one of the bulls and prepare it first. Since there are so many of you, call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire." So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning until noon. "Oh, Baal, answer us!" they shouted, but there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar that they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder," he said. "Surely he is God. Is a God? Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until the blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice, but there was no response. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he replied, "Repaired the altar of the Lord which was in ruins." Elijah took 12 stones, one from each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, "Fill 4 large jars with water, and pour it on the offering and on the wood." "Do it again," he said, and they did it again. "Do it a 3rd time," he ordered, and they did it the 3rd time, and the water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God of Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." And then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. And when all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, "The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God." Let us pray. Dear Lord, thank you for being our God. Thank you for being a God who is with us wherever we go, who never abandons us, who never goes to sleep, who never falters, who is always there. Thank you for the love that you have for us. For though we are but one of billions of people that you have made, you know our name, you know the number of the hairs on our head, and you love us. We thank you for that, God. We ask that you help us to remember that when we walk in the dark places that we must walk throughout this life and in this world, that we might remember that you walk with us. And when our world is torn apart and when all seems hopeless, Help us to remember that you are still with us. For you are the God of the mountaintops and the God of the valley. The God who walks with his people wherever they tread. Help us to remember that this week. Help us to remind those who we meet of that this week. And help us to listen for your urging and your voice as you might have us to speak and to share your love with someone. We ask your blessings upon the word we have read and upon the word we are about to hear. And we ask all of this in the name of your wonderful Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
So typically when one preaches, they are given an allowance of only so many edgy, controversial things one can say. And I think with my comment during the choir special, I might have burned out all those edgy comments. If anyone has a spare bed for tonight, a place of safe refuge. Fun fact, Mount Carmel, to which the story takes place, was a place of refuge. It was a holy place, but it was a place where criminals could run and just seek refuge and allow them to seek repentance, but without the community being harmed. And I find that my comments have truly reflected the context of this passage.
We will find you.
Yeah. Yes.
It's hard to get hot, brother.
True, man. True. All right. As I get things together, I will have to admit that as we go into the sermon today, that it might be a little bit different than what any of us are accustomed to. This sermon has taken many forms over the past several weeks. I kept struggling to write one that I was satisfied. I kept rewriting and rewriting. But then again, it's not what I'm satisfied with, is it? It's what God is satisfied with. But I digress. The title of the sermon is Tell Me All Your Thoughts on God. It is a 90s song reference. It is from the song Counting Blue Cars by the band Dishwalla. And for anyone curious, that should tell you all you need to know about how strange the 90s were. Tell me all your thoughts on God. How would you respond if someone asked that of you? Well, if you were a painter and you were tasked with painting God, what would God look like? If you were a writer, what would that book say? And more importantly, if that book were to be put into a bookstore, would that book be in the nonfiction aisle, the fiction aisle, or the semi-fiction? What are your thoughts on God? That question is probably one of the most important questions you can ask a person or ask yourself. No matter if you're a Christian, if you're Jewish, Muslim, atheist, agnostic, or apathetic, I repeat that this is one of the most important questions you can ask yourself or anyone else. With it being the start of the new year, now is a good time to ask yourself that. In fact, it's really just a good time to ask yourself, what do you believe as you go into the new year? You know, as one thing as I heard as we march towards 2020, people were saying, new year, new you. New year, new decade, new you. With the new you can become the new beliefs. In fact, is my prayer that during this sermon, and as you go out after this, that this is a question you take inventory of what you actually believe or what you actually think about God. That being said, as we approach this passage, I want us to look at this at a passage in a different way. I really want us to focus more, not necessarily on what's going on in the story, but what specifically how the actions and the comments of the individuals in that, how that reflects what they may believe about God. And what we'll find that these beliefs that existed back then, or these misconceptions about God, actually exist to this day. So let's begin. Let us first take a look at our boy Elijah. Elijah is the last prophet, as Sophie says. I guess I should do a little bit of quick context. The passage opens up with Ahab. Ahab is currently the king of Israel. Ahab married a lady named Jezebel. Jezebel was his queen, but she was also a Phoenician princess. She was from the country of Phoenicia, which is now known as modern-day Lebanon. He married her as a form of political alliance, as some kings did during that time. Plain and simple. He married the king of Phoenicia's daughter, so they would not go to war. Can't really go to war with your son-in-law, or that makes for an awkward Thanksgiving dinner. Just ask our house now. The controversy about Ahab, because Ahab is not well regarded, is because of his marriage to Jezebel, not necessarily because of the political alliance, but because of what Jezebel brought with her. With her brought the culture of the Phoenicians and the religion, a Canaanite religion, and with that brought some stuff. Altars were built for the deities in that religion, Baal or Baal as Ari pronounced it. It really all depends. There's 14 different translations. There's Baal, there's Baal, there's Baal. The last one sounding more like a Klingon from Star Trek. Brought in, who was the chief deity of this religion, brought them in, established temples and altars for him, and then went out and destroyed temples and altars for Yahweh, the name of the God of the Israelites, the God which we today also worship. She establishes these prophets and funds them with government money. These 450 prophets of Baal, an additional 400 prophets to the goddess Azura, who is Baal's wife, and then proceeds to exterminate, execute, kill, whatever fancy word. She goes and starts killing prophets of Yahweh, causing 100 to go into hiding and leaving only Elijah to be there. And Elijah, being a man after my own heart, being stubborn, decides to continually get into the king and queen's face and says, no, I'm not going to take it. No, I'm not going to take it. We're not going to take it anymore. And continually fights them and argues with them and goes back and forth, leading up into this confrontation. He goes up to Ahab and says, all right, I want you to get all the prophets of Baal. I want you to get anyone in Israel to come. We're going to settle this right here, right now. So we get to this passage. I want us first, but like I said before, the story is not necessarily as important as what's going on and what is Elijah's actions and the prophets of Baal, what their actions and comments reflect. If you go to verse 22, then Elijah said to the people, I am the only one remaining prophet of the Lord. The Baal's prophets are 450 men. Hold on, that's actually not right. Hold on. Actually, there we go. Actually, verse 21, sorry. If Elijah looks at the people and says, if Yahweh is God, follow him, but if Baal, follow him. But the people didn't answer him a word. Elijah is asserting that Yahweh is the one and only God, which is very difficult concept for folks to think about this time. Think about what you know from history. Not even just of the Canaanite religion. Think of the Greeks, the Romans. They all believed in many gods. And it's very common for people to worship one God, but acknowledge the existence of others. But Elijah is saying, no, there is only one God. He's asserting this thing that there is only one God. One has to be it. And I think today, live in a world where we're confronted and we're surrounded because we're in this melting pot, or as Dr. Palomino from Garden Oven said, a tossed salad of a country where we're exposed to different cultures and customs and different other religious beliefs. Sometimes it's easy to kind of take this mindset, okay, well, there's this God and there's this God. We believe in this God, but we become more, and I don't want to say the word accepting because we must not be judgmental of folks, we must love them, but we get this idea that, yeah, I worship this one God, but I'm going to allow this other idea of another God to be in existence. And the reality is that when we look at the many religions of the world, the truth is that they are all seeking the one true God. There is one God, one creator of this universe. But just one of us, the question is what does that God truly look like? But more importantly and more sophomorically, I'd like to focus on verse 27. Elijah's taunting and mocking, and I appreciate Ari's getting into it as he reads out the taunt of Elijah. Elijah is smack talking. As a youth minister, you love to go this passage because, well, quite frankly, youth, young people, we like to smack talk. Whether it's playing basketball, playing video games, even like school sometimes, thinking I went to nerd school, so we like, aha, I got higher on my EOT than you, dog. Yeah, oh, my research paper was 22 pages versus your 21. We like to smack talk, and we draw into this, and I want us to look at this smack talk, this comment, this mocking, this insult to the prophets of Baal, and see what is being communicated in here. Shout loudly, for he's a God. Shout louder. You guys speak a little louder. Sometimes gods, their hearing goes out. They've been around for thousands, millennia. As you get older, like Richie Mike, your hearing goes out. So maybe we just need to speak a little bit louder. Maybe he's thinking it over. Maybe Baal just can't make up his mind. He's a little indecisive today. Maybe he just doesn't have the confidence, and we got to cheer him on. Come on, you can do it, Baal. Who's a strong God? Who's a big, powerful deity? Yes, you are. Come on out. Maybe he's wandered away, or maybe he's on the road. That's the interesting phrase in our English translation. Well, this is the Holman Combs Standard Bible. What translation were you reading? New International, yes, of course. It's always, the phrasing in English is always interesting. He's wandered away, or maybe he's on the road. It sounds a little bit redundant, right? Maybe he's not here right now. So, I'm going to tell you, there's a key difference between Rebecca, myself, and Ari. Ari, out of all of us, knows more languages than anyone in this room. And I applaud him for that. I know Greek, Hebrew, Latin. Took a year American Sign Language. My wife took a singular semester American Sign Language. Typically, just on the educational stats, I should know more American Sign Language than she did. But the thing is she was a better student than I, because again, being Robert, and as you all know, I'm a little bit sophomoric. The only thing I tend to remember is the funny words or the inappropriate words. Actually, the only sign that I really remember is a sign to go to the bathroom. And David Kahn, I miss him so, because I taught him that. And whenever he would come in, he would see me from afar, he would look at me, and he would do this. My wife remembers a lot more sign language. She also, one of her first students she ever had was deaf, and so she picked it up. When it comes to Greek and Hebrew, same thing, as Ari's going to be more proficient at me, because some of the stuff I don't remember as well, but some I remember distinctly. And one of the things that stood out to me, Dr. Robertson was teaching us about language, because this Old Testament, this book, and many books in the Old Testament were originally written in Hebrew. And when we look at having to look at the original Hebrew, there's some difficulties. One, you got to read from right to left. I had to make sure I remember my left and my right. There's a lot of funny squiggly lines. And there's no vowels and punctuation. But that's not the difficult part. In fact, the most difficult part about learning Hebrew is the most difficult part of learning any other language. And it's the figure of speech. Example. If R and I were going to go spend some time together, just relaxing and just enjoying each other's company, one might say, oh, we were just chilling out. Or we were hanging out. If you read that most literally, what would you think? If you, without context, you were reading it most literally, it was either A, Ari and Robert decided to sit in a freezer for a little bit, or Robert and Ari decided to get in trouble in the Old West and was being put a noose around our necks to be hung because we robbed a bank or something. And that figure of speech is not just centralized to English. Other languages have it too. He has wandered away is most literally translated into the phrase, he has turned aside. And I'm spending way too much time on this. He has turned aside, which can most very specifically translated to, maybe your God is in the bathroom taking a poop. Maybe he's gone. Maybe he's sleeping and he's awake. Now, outside of my sophomore giggleness, hey, another poop reference in the Bible, I want you to stick with this because this is important. I'm not just being immature. When we look at all these phrases, these are very human qualities, right? Very human qualities. The ability to hear or not to hear, the ability to lose one's hearing. The being indecisive, to think, to not know if I can do something. Low self-esteem, that's very human. To not be in the mood to do something, that's very human. To go to the bathroom, whether you acknowledge it or not, going to the bathroom is one of the most controlling things over our lives. No matter who you are, where you are, if you have to go to the bathroom, you're going to have to go. You're under its control. Maybe he's on the road, he's a physical location. This God can only be physically located in one specific place at a time. That's a human. I can't be everywhere at once. The need to sleep, that's another enslaving thing. Oh, I need to rest, I get tired. When we look at historically, when we look at the gods of the Canaanite religion, or the gods of the Greeks or the Romans, they're very human. In fact, they are just humans with superpowers. Zeus was a womanizing drunk. So was Thor, until he joined the Avengers. Baal wanted to be entertained and had an anger issue. We must be careful to remind ourselves that humans were made in the image of God and not God made in the image of man, which is something we so terribly do often. Elijah in this time is saying, your God isn't a God at all. He's a human. Worst of us. You don't worship a God, you worship a man. And we may think that that's just localized to those ancient religions, but we do the same today. If our thoughts, using the paint, the image, is an image of God, or our thoughts of God is an image, first and foremost, so often that image is the same as the one that you look at when you look up from the sink in the bathroom. It's a mirror image. Oftentimes, even our leaders are so prone to this throughout history, is that the God of the universe, the God of the Bible, the one singular God who existed and will always exist, looks like me. He has the same angers. He has the same intolerance. He has the same views on politics and life. In the end, this God, this image reflects more of my image than I, created in God, reflect His image. Here's the other thing. And this is very important. This is both for parents and children the same alike. Just take that same observation, that same thoughts on God and address it. It's oftentimes that image of God looks like mom or dad. This is a challenge for parents. How you raise your child, how you interact with them, how they see you interact, and how you judge the world is their first beginning trace outlines of who God looks like, who God looks like in their mind. Sadly, that can leave long-lasting negative effects. One of the biggest controversies at Gardner Webb that I got exposed to in our first class together, Ari, I don't know if you remember this, was, I forget, it was like the First Baptist, it was a pastor from First Baptist, I don't know if it was like Virginia Beach or someone had came down, and in the middle of his speech, someone asked him about, well, how do you deal with Father God and considering of using gender-exclusive language? And he said, well, I want to take in consideration those who have had abusive fathers and how that language could turn them off, but I would also draw from the fact that Jesus used it. It's good enough for Jesus, good enough for me. And that blew up our class. We spent so long talking about that, and I don't want to spend too long on that because I spent too long on the poop comment. But I want us to sit here and think of one thing. That it is very true that there are people who have had fathers who have been crummy, who have been scum of the earth. And whenever someone uses the phrase, Father God, when you're witnessing and evangelizing them, trying to show them the true God, they hear the word Father, and immediately they're flooded with images of abuse, of intolerance, of screaming, yelling, angerness, and immediately they shut down. Parents, what image of God will your children have? But on the same note, for children here, you must do like I have to do so very often. And recognize that the God of the universe, though He is the Father, the ultimate spiritual Father that never leaves us or forsakes us, He is not like our earthly parents. And when you encounter God and you think about how is God going to react to that, first thing you need to ask yourself, am I thinking about how God would react, or am I thinking about how mom and dad would react? Sometimes we make gods out of religious figures. Billy Graham, the Pope. I know folks who get attached to one pastor and then that is them. Our God is not that pastor. Do you do this? When you look at your thoughts on God, when you look at your image, does that image look like you? Does it look like your parents? Now let's look at the prophets of Baal. Let's talk a little bit more about this Canaanite religion very quickly. It is regarded by historians and archaeologists as a fertility cult. And I want you to take all the negative ideas you have of the phrase word cult, and I want you to hold on to that. Because this is very much, even though it was a religion, it was a cult. It was a cult that was designed to consume and destroy. And here's how they got away with it. It wasn't just Jezebel tearing down altars and threatening to kill people. The Canaanite religion had something to offer the people. You see, at this point in Israel's history, at this point from a climate stat of the world, it has a small rain season. I mean, it only rains a handful of times a year. Unlike us, which can rain a handful of times in a day. And if the rain didn't come when expected, or if the rain didn't rain as much, or it didn't rain at all, famine broke out in an instant. So old Baal and his chum of God said, hey, see you starving there. Come over to me, entertain me, give me what I want, and I'll make sure you have the food you need. But not only with that, not only can I give you what you want, give you what you need, I can give you what you want. These fertility cults had another aspect of it. Fertility for the ground and fertility people. People were sold and given to farmers as slaves for sexual gratification. Human trafficking was very much alive there. We talk about more so now, especially as pastors and politicians engage with how the pornography industry leads to that. It's very common there. They use sexual gratification as a drug to entrance people. All because of the price of admission. The price of admission, we get a hint of it. We get the hint when the prophet's dancing, shouting loudly. And we get the most big hint of it with this verse. They shouted loudly and cut themselves with knives and spears according to their custom, until blood gushed over them. One of my favorite movies of all time is Aladdin, and that just got remade this past year. And I have not seen the remake. I'm very interested to see how Will Smith does as Genie versus Robin Williams. But there was a time in the 90s where genies were all the popular rage. You had Robin Williams in Aladdin, you had Shaq in Kazam, or Shazam, one of the two. Genies were everywhere. And we think about, a genie in a lamp, a fairy godmother. But let's go back to the origin of genie for a second. Because genie was originally pronounced, it was a mythological creature in the Arab religions. It was called a jinn. And the jinn, like the genies we see in Aladdin, could give you whatever you want, whatever you need, would grant your wishes. But that genie, that jinn, demanded blood. Baal demanded to be entertained. That's why they danced. But Baal, more importantly, had a thirst, had a craving, and the craving was blood. And not only did the prophets have to hurt themselves, cut themselves, the people, if you wanted what Baal had, what Baal had, you had to give them something. Baal demanded children. Didn't matter if it was just your firstborn. That was a good start. But in order to appease Baal, in order to participate, the price of admission for this religion, this cult, to appease this God, to believe in this God, was you had to take a child, your child, alive, and throw them into a fire where they slowly burned to death. And Israel started to pay that admission. Some people look back at the Old Testament and say, well, God was really harsh on these other religions. When Joshua goes to war with the Canaanites, we seldom learn about the other part, about the killing of children, the demanding of blood. Now, Robert, we don't have many religions that do that today, if any. Yet Christianity is just as bad. We look at the individual, the personal level. Anytime tragedy strikes a person, we think, is God angry with us? Is God punishing us? In fact, this kind of idea of a genie that demanded blood, that, when I go back and look at how I was through high school and early college, that's what I had. If I was doing the right thing, if God was happy with me, man, He'd give me whatever I want. He helped me pass the tests. He helped me do this, that, and the other. But man, if I know, hey, that prayer didn't get answered today, God angry with me? And then some other bad stuff, oh, God's really angry with me. He's punishing me. Oh, God might leave me. But it's not just me. One of the most common things we hear is if someone dies, if someone loses a loved one, was that person living in sin? Or did you love that person so much? There was one of the most common beliefs about miscarriage was, did the parents sin? In fact, I remember in college reading a story in which a pastor and his wife, they lost their child. And another pastor came up to him and said, which one of you sinned? Because if you don't repent, this will keep happening. We use this language every day. Even when we say, well, if you don't do this, God's not going to bless you. Like to everything about heaven is meritocracy. It's about what you can earn, not just being in the presence of God. But then we saw this as on a wider scale. The one thing I'm going back to is the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. Love him or hate him, Governor Mike Huckabee got up on the TV, on national media, Fox News, and his words got plastered everywhere, right after the Sandy Hook shooting, and he said, I quote, "A lot of people ask me, when tragedies like this happen, where is God? Why didn't God stop that man from shooting those kids?" And I said, well, quite frankly, we march God out of our schools, we take prayer out, we take God, the Ten Commandments off of our courtroom. We ask God to leave, and yet we expect Him to help us out. I have a problem with that statement. Because that statement reflects a God that is a genie that demands blood. That our God, the God that we claim is the only God, the God of the universe, demands our blood, when in reality the only blood God demanded was the one of His own Son, Jesus. This mentality of a genie that fights blood, we let it seep into our consciousness and our thoughts about God, and we don't even realize it. That's why when we mess up, sometimes we want to run and we want to hide and we're afraid. Then our first thought, if something goes wrong, is, God, what have I done wrong? We, right now, all that frozen chicken in that hut right now is all designed so that we can give it to people who are hungry, and yet the power is out. And when Mike told me that, even this little flick in my head is, did we do something wrong? We have to fight those thoughts. Sadly, we even did this with Hurricane Katrina. In the weeks after the hurricane hit New Orleans, some of the most common things I heard was, well, you ever been to New Orleans? It is a cesspool of filth. People, homosexuals acting out in the streets, and sex and drugs and everything running rampant. Okay. As we conclude, I recognize that all I've done is tell you what to not believe about God. I hope that in this I've encouraged you to at least check all your thoughts. Go through them. List them out. Do I believe and interact with God like these folks in the passage? But I also told you all the wrong things. I haven't told you any right things to think about God. And if I'm honest, well, that's a sermon for another day. It's actually a whole series of sermons. You could hear or write a lifetime of sermons and still be growing in your ideas and learning new things about who God is. You'd only be touching the surface. That's why I'm preaching this sermon today. The prayer is not only do you figure out what you believe, but that something inside you stirs. That as you're thinking about, oh, this is what I actually believe about God, something inside you stirs. Maybe that's not right. Or maybe I want to learn something more. Something to thirst, to search. and say, I want to know the real God. Whether you're Christian or, like I said, anything else. Ask yourself, do I know, what are my thoughts on God? And do I really want to know the truth? But let's leave us with something good. Elijah repairs the altar, takes 12 stones according to the number of tribes of Israel, puts them together, fills the cup, pours over. He has this confidence, right? A little bit of cocky. Yeah, we're going to build this altar. All right, pour water. Pour more. Pour more. Again, I'm probably transposing my image on Elijah, but like sometimes when I get really riled up and really confident, I'm like, yeah! Like a pro wrestler, do this! Come on! We got this! But I can tell you that, I kind of did that with, when the Cardinals were beating the Braves in the National League Championship Series. I got a little bit excited. But there's this confidence about Elijah, and that confidence tells us something. Particularly when we look at what he says. Elijah's confidence in the coming fire reflects the belief that Yahweh is not a God made by man or the image of man. That Yahweh is not a bloodthirsty genie. That Yahweh, our God, the one true God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the God that sent his son to die on the cross for us, is a God that wants to bring us back to him. No matter how far we have wandered off or ignored him, no matter how much of the price of admission that we paid for other gods, gods that are not him, he doesn't leave us. Elijah says, Yahweh, God of Abraham, Isaac, Israel, today let it be known that you are God in Israel, and I am your servant.